Welcome to Around the Drafting Table, where we talk about topics that are top of mind for homeowners looking to design a new home. I am Kory, the Oxford architect. Our topic today is electrical engineering, another member of the design team on your custom home journey that can have an impact on your long-term enjoyment and comfort in the home. Joining us today, we have electrical engineer Dexton Graves from Royal Engineering. Dex, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Kory. I'm always excited to talk about electricity, so thank you.
It's one of those things that is a mystical, magical force in all of our lives for many people, myself included.
Agreed.
Yeah. Jumping straight in then, would you like to briefly talk about your experience and how Royal Engineering tackles high-end custom home design differently from other typologies that you work on?
Absolutely. When it comes to custom homes, we're not usually talking about, your run-of-the-mill residential type home. I mean, this is a different home. And oftentimes, electrical engineering in standard residential homes or even commercial type projects, it can be fairly predictable. There's a
Hmm.
lot of copy paste, there's a lot of repeatability. You'll see those patterns popping up as you continue to design those things. But custom homes, they do tend to move to more of a luxury, and they tend to be different. When it comes to the engineering of a custom home, we have to take a very owner-oriented approach. Now, it still mandates, obviously, compliance to electrical code and specification of high quality equipment. But by taking an owner-oriented approach to the design, we
Hmm.
can meet those engineering requirements while still designing the home in a way that the owner envisions it. So it's not an engineer's home, it is the owner's home, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. What do you normally see that's different from more standard production-built homes or commercial?
That's a great question. When you look into your standard production homes or you look into commercial, things tend to be extremely cost oriented. Now, that's not always the case, and that's not to say that custom homes cannot be custom or cost oriented. But what it means is people are looking to get lighting in a space, as simple as
Hmm.
that. You can get a puck light to do that. It's very cost effective. They're looking to have uniformity. They're looking to get standard code met and get people moved in as quickly as possible.
Yep.
Where the custom home kind of differs is, people want the home to look how they want it. And if you're building a custom home, you may not want just puck lighting everywhere. You may want some
Hmm.
type a better visual appearance as you walk into an entryway. If you walk into a beautiful home from the outside to look up at a puck in an entryway, it's not very pretty. There's things like putting in a chandelier or putting in some custom wall sconces or just making the home more comfortable and a better
Hmm.
fit for the owner. That's the biggest difference is it's so much more geared towards that living and how the owner wants to view it, and it's not
Yeah.
so much of a copy paste.
Yeah. Really good lighting design is what takes a design from good to great. And I consider it an essential component of custom home design. Do you do a lot of lighting design as part of the electrical engineering, or do you often find yourself paired with a lighting designer?
We see both. And I would say, playing to my strengths and trying to admit where engineers tend to have a little bit of the not so much of the strength or have a weakness is we are very good at engineering. We're good at
Hmm.
getting light levels where they need them. And so we can oftentimes specify a lot of lighting. We do find ourselves doing a lot of lighting design. But what I would say when it comes to things that need to be prettier, for lack of a better terms, a
Hmm.
custom home, a nice restaurant, things like that. We often find ourselves paired with interior designers or with architects with more of a design-minded approach.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's good to be collaborative in those things as well and work across the team. Any element of the design that's being kind of created in a silo is not going to be quite as cohesive. So glad to hear that you guys are working that way.
Agreed. Yeah.
One of the essential questions for all owners embarking on their design journey is which professionals to include, as each one comes with an associated cost. What value do you feel you bring to the project, and why should an owner choose to work with an electrical engineer versus letting an electrician make all the decisions during installation?
That's a fantastic question, Kory. And please stop me if I ramble because this is a big question because
Hmm.
why can't the electrician just do it all
Yeah.
instead of bringing on an electrical engineer because there is an added cost there. So electricians can do residential homes without the use of an electrical engineer. There's homes built every day solely by electricians. They can get in and those contractors can take care of that without our aid, without the aid of the electrical engineers. And people live happy and comfortable lives in those homes.
Hmm.
But I would say that this is not often the case with the custom homes. And the reason being is that, first of all, these homes tend to have a greater square footage and
Yep.
there's greater electrical requirements in these
Hmm.
homes than you'd find in your standard residential home. So as we approach the larger square footage, maybe beginning around 7,000 to 8,000 square feet,
Hmm.
even a little above, a little below that range, it's advisable to involve engineers in the design of these homes. Now, what this does is it takes the design, the engineering calculations, the wire sizing, the equipment specifications, all those fun electrical terms. It takes everything electrical relating to the project and it puts it on paper. And then you give it to the electrical contractor. So
Yeah.
this not only gives the contractor, a specific, again, hopefully or owner-oriented direction as we've been involved in the design process for the project, but
Hmm.
it holds them, this is one of the biggest parts, it holds them accountable for the design. So, what I mean by this is heaven forbid a contractor doesn't follow code or doesn't follow, the provided calculations or plans or things like that, or
Uh-huh.
decides to use a lesser quality of equipment. There's some aspects that an inspector can catch, but there's also, things that can slip past. And so involving an engineer can lessen the likelihood of some of those errors, as
Hmm.
we view equipment. If we can get submittals of the equipment that the electrical contractor is purchasing to put in there, we can have a review of that equipment and we can say, this doesn't meet a quality standard that the owner would like to have in their home. And we can reject that and require that they use something of a better grade or a better quality
Yeah.
so that they can, again, provide quality work for the homeowner.
So, I mean, if I could sum up then, it sounds like you're saying that it really boils down to kind of trust and insurance.
Yes,
It's like there's an opportunity to review everything before it goes in. You have another professional working on the project who is highly skilled and motivated to see quality, um, who can double check all that work. You mentioned the inspector. We love our inspectors out on site. I think they do a fantastic job. They're an important part of the whole project. But anytime we add an additional set of eyes to be reviewing things being installed, it's just another opportunity to make sure that we're catching things. Electrical mistakes can cause fires. Electrical mistakes could be the end of a project. So having things double and triple checked is very healthy.
definitely. And I agree. And I don't want to boast my profession, but it seems like electricity is one of those things that a lot of people are very wary of. And so it's one of
Hmm.
those things that we want to make sure that we get right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to say I worked with a lot of really great electricians as well. All of these people are trusted members of the team, but all of us working together is what results in a quality project.
Agreed.
Okay. Tell us about custom home projects that you worked on recently. Can you share any project details or outcomes?
Yeah, so let me think on that for a minute. So one of the most recent ones we did, we just finished one up in Wasatch County, and it was a beautiful, I think it was an 8,600 square foot home, I believe is around that range.
Hmm.
And some of the things to note on the project is in comparison to a standard residential home is the electric service size on that project was significantly larger than you would typically see on again your run-of-the-mill residential home.
Yeah.
Uh,
Was that due just to the size or because of service requirements in the home? Were there special features they had added in?
Yeah, great to point that out. It was because of the special features. Now, it plays a little bit into both the square footage and the special features because
Hmm.
of the way the National Electrical Code is written. Whereas residential, you can base the service size off of a lot of the square footage of the home.
Uh-huh.
But on top of that, when you start adding things like a hot tub,
Hmm.
electric, any type of electric heat draws a lot of power.
Yep.
Specialty things inside the home like that, adding EV chargers in the garage, those continue to bring up the service size. So, again, it's important to have good calculations on that because if you come in and you install on a typical home, you can see around a 200 amp service in
Hmm.
the And usually the main breaker on the home is smaller than that, but you can get up to normally a 200 amp service on a home. But in this
Yep.
home, if we had installed a 200 amp service based on the calculations, that's well below what the peak value on that home could be. And so
Right.
by sizing it to, I believe in that case it was a 400 amp service that we sized for the home, it allowed
Yeah.
for the full use of the electrical capacity of the home.
Right. And that's a very large panel. Um, Talking about amps just really briefly, uh, I think most people don't really understand the different components of electricity. Um, what is an amp? And when we talk about the size of the panel, what does that really mean for owners? Like you talked about peak draw. Do people really need to be providing service equal to that like maximum peak draw, or can they have a lower service and still have a functional home?
Great question, Kory. So talking about amperage, when we talk about that first, we're talking about the flow of the electricity.
Hmm.
So when we talk about voltage and we're talking about potential, and forgive me, I tend to get a little bit, again, I like to talk about electricity. So hopefully I
Yeah.
can explain this well. But voltage is your potential for that electricity to flow, where current is the flow of the electricity. So the actual the actual movement, the flow of those electrons through the wires. So
Uh-huh.
to putting that in perspective,
So
when you
is
have
that current is amperage?
correct.
Okay.
So current is your
So
amperage.
if you're pulling amps, electricity is flowing.
Correct. And
Okay.
electricity flowing against resistance. So even your wires have a very small resistance, but what
Sure.
current flowing, amperage flowing, it causes heat.
Hmm.
And so you have to make sure that wiring and equipment is rated for that amperage. The
Yeah.
higher,
And
yeah,
basically a thicker wire can handle more electricity before it starts to get warm, right?
correct. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and overdrawing on a wire is when you can have a fire risk. Like if you have too thin of a wire, you pull too much electricity through it, it can melt, and then that's when you get a fire, right?
Exactly. And I love this topic because I think it's important for homeowners to realize that, you look at a panel and you look at the breakers and it's fun to look at breakers and it might even be fun to toggle them, but really
The very, very satisfying click back and forth.
so it's important to really understand that that breaker, I mean, it's literally there for your protection. It's there
Yeah,
to make sure that whatever wire is run from that breaker does not draw more amperage, get more heat than it should.
right.
So
And that's why it's important. I mean, the electricians understand this. This is their bread and butter all day, every day, making sure they don't put too many items on each one of those circuits so that it's not being overdrawn and leading to potential problems.
mhm,
But in the case something does get overdrawn, that's when you see a breaker trip, right?
exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So by having that larger service, potentially, 400 amps for the larger homes, this ensures that there is enough electricity that even if they're running absolutely everything in the home at its max capacity, they shouldn't see any breakers trip, which is convenience.
Yeah. And one of the nice things about that, Kory, is, you know, a lot of those engineering calculations, they're for protection. They're to make sure that
Hmm.
things are safe and again, so that they're sized appropriately so that you don't have breakers tripping as a nuisance when they shouldn't be.
Right.
But by doing those engineering calculations beforehand, it also sets the home up um, for additional power in the future because we are taking a peak load. We're taking a peak load of the house, and if they don't reach that peak load, um, later down the road as they use specific instruments to test those loads, you
Hmm.
can find that you're actually drawing below that peak, and it
Yeah.
leaves the ability to expand in the future, maybe add additional electrical loads that you come to find you'd like in your home.
Yeah. I mean, and I do that in my current home. I live in an older home. I have 125 amp service, but my wife and I both have electric cars. And so you'd think, oh, well, you're surely overloading your breaker. But what we do is the cars charge overnight when we're not using any other devices. So we're not really testing that peak load just by spreading things out over the 24-hour period.
Yep, exactly that timing right there.
Hmm.
And again, even though the calculation shows what it is, that doesn't mean that in a home like in your case, Kory, 125 amps, and I'm not sure what your breaker was for those EV chargers, whether it's a 30, 40, 50 amp breaker.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that can't be installed. It means that the calculation was done, and then now that you're in the home, there's a potential that you're not drawing quite the energy that is anticipated, and you have some
Right.
capacity there.
Now, sometimes we talk about mechanical systems, and having oversized mechanical systems is actually a bad thing because they don't run efficiently. But that's not really the case with electrical panels, right? Having a large headroom is really no problem, correct?
Correct. It really it's not a problem. The only problem that comes into play there, and it's just a matter of cost, because if
Hmm.
you get a 400 amp panel, it's more expensive.
Right.
Granted, in the grand scheme of things, between 4 to 200, I don't believe the cost is extremely significant, but that's the downside, is just the cost is a little bit more.
Sure. Sure. So it might be one of those things where if someone is kind of right on the edge of that 200 amp service, like maybe that's adequate, maybe it's not. Choosing to go a little bit higher and providing some headroom is a worthy investment in future uses.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I know if I'm not at that position yet, but if I ever build a home, for the nature of what I do, I've already planned to make sure that that size is as big as they'll
Hmm.
get. So I have sufficient for what I need.
Electrical engineers frequently represent switches, outlet locations, and heights, and lighting, as we talked about, in the plans that you create. Um, Beyond those surface level items, what other equipment is included in an electrical package? We talked about the panel, or put another way, what else are you doing during the course of the design process that brings value to the project?
Yeah, well, you're right, Kory. From a topical level, that's usually what people see and what they care about.
Hmm.
Light switches, lighting, even the outlets sometimes are overlooked, but those are some of the more topical things that you'll see.
Yep.
But electrical design and engineering does run much deeper than that, and at least beyond those topical elements. So we did discuss the electrical panel, and hopefully, everybody at least knows where their electrical panel is in their house. If they don't, I invite you to do a little in Indiana Jones adventuring and go find whatever
Hmm.
that's locked away in. But there's a lot that goes into, again, like we talked about, the sizing of those panels. What's the fault current rating on the panel? And what I mean by that, again, going into one of those weird electrical engineering terms,
Hmm.
what if something went wrong, what could those breakers handle before they were ruined? We want to make sure that those are capable of withstanding any errors they receive, and not destroying the breakers, rather than just having them trip to be reset later. Fault
Yeah.
current rating, breaker sizing, panel manufacturers, making sure it's reputable. So again, it runs deeper, even out to the main service of the house, your meter, your main breaker on your home, even as we connect to the transformer from the utility company, making sure that we're following utility company procedure as far as conduit sizing, as far as conductor sizing.
Hmm.
So yes, it runs deeper than most people look into.
And we already talked earlier a little bit about, what you're doing during the construction period, where you're double checking the work of the electrician out on site, reviewing information they're sending you on the equipment that they're planning to use. You mentioned, checking to make sure that there's reputable manufacturers, et cetera. So you're really part of the process from the beginning all the way through the end.
Yeah. And for the owner, from a cost perspective, part of that can be up to them, because they
Hmm.
can involve us in design and then choose not to have an engineer, through the construction administration period. That is up to the owner. But by
Yes.
allowing the engineer to be part of that process, like you said, all the way through, um, and again, working with our counterparts, those amazing electrical contractors, if they ever have a question, if they ever wanted to submit something to see if it's approvable, we can work hand in hand with them. Because I mean, I worked on several projects. Contractors have questions, and contractors, they want to make sure they're ordering good equipment to make sure that you don't come in later and say this is not good, you've got to tear it out.
Right.
And so, like you said, Kory, we're all a part of this working design team working together, and so we're there to work hand in hand with those electrical contractors to
Hmm.
make sure that it's quality equipment, and that the code is respected, and that we know exactly where to go with the design.
Okay. So on this next question, I feel like we've touched on probably all the points that you're going to state here, but let's just lay it out clearly. What would you say are the highest priorities in electrical design for homes?
Another good question. And there's so many priorities, and I
Hmm.
know that those priorities revolve mainly around the homeowner and what they'd like to see. But I will say that for electrical design, electrical engineering, the highest priority is always safety.
Okay.
It's always safety with electricity and installation to make sure that those who live in the home are never presented with an unsafe circumstance,
Hmm.
especially if electricity is concerned, because that's what we do. There's several codes surrounding, electricity that are geared just towards safety. As you look into the National Electrical Code, the NFPA 70, the other NFPA publications, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of publication. And so many of these codes are just geared around the safety of the individual, the people in the home and the people installing the electrical components therein. So
Right.
safety is the number one priority always.
Okay. Great. What challenges do you regularly face on high-end custom homes, and how do you overcome them?
A custom home comes with its own unique set of challenges, but I would say one of the biggest challenges for electrical design, electrical engineering with custom homes is
Hmm.
getting all the information that we need in a timely manner.
Okay.
For example, we're engineers and we're valued for the calculations, our electrical knowledge, and our
Hmm.
knowledge on code. Um, but kind of like we mentioned before, we're not always highly valued for our design skills, and that's good. That's a good thing. There's other people who are better at specific, um, design to make things more comfortable in a room, to make the lighting look better, to choose those specific light fixtures that are geared toward the owner's desire and how they'd like their home to look. But
Hmm.
I've been in situations where that's great. We have other people select the lighting, but as engineers, we need to know what the wattage of each of those fixtures is. We need to know where it's going to be placed. We need to prepare for those loads in the panels. And
Yeah.
I've had a project where I didn't get that design until the day the project was due. And at that point, it's not feasible.
Right.
You're going to
So
have
you
to
were getting information on what the light fixtures that were going in very late, or
the light fixtures going in and
okay.
their placement going late. Now,
All right.
now
So you were
differences.
working off assumptions and allowances probably.
Yep, exactly. And
Mm.
so the biggest hiccup I would say is just getting what the owner wants and the design that they want, not just with lighting, but with everything that will be specific to the home's design. Getting that up front saves so much time and
Yeah.
allows us to quickly get in and finish our work.
Okay. Good to know. And that goes back to, working with the lighting and interior designers very closely to make
Mhm.
sure you're getting that in a timely manner. Um, for my process, I like to bring you guys in during schematic design. Before you're expected to actually produce anything, I like to sit down with the owners, with each of my professionals on the team one by one, so that you can have a discussion around expectations and what the owner wants to achieve. So, that process I think facilitates getting you all the information you're looking for right up front.
It does. And I know that there's a heavy responsibility on our part to make sure that we as well communicate. I need this and I need this by this time.
Hmm.
That's not a threat. That's just I need it by this time, or it can cause delays in your project because
Yeah.
we don't want to submit engineered drawings that are not complete. We
Yeah.
don't want you to have anything that would cause you to have to come back later and upsize breakers and upsize your service. We want to get it as complete as possible before this is submitted.
Yeah. Well, that's a good note to all owners, anyone who's not worked on a custom home project before for themselves. They are the owner. They're an important partner in the project, and it's important that they remain engaged and deliver things in a timely manner. Owners delaying decision making or not being available for meetings is one of the risks to a project that can delay things and cause issues. So good to note for owners that we value their input at all times. All right. If an owner wanted to future-proof their home, what should they include to be sure they can handle whatever life throws at them over the next few decades?
With that, Kory, I would say going back to you had mentioned that meeting, bringing everyone together, including
Hmm.
the owner, using that time to truly express what is wanted, even if it's not wanted right now.
Uh-huh.
If an owner says, "Yeah, I don't have an EV vehicle, but you know what? Me and my wife are looking into them, and maybe 10 years down the road, we're going to get them." Great. we're going to want to plan for some capacity so that
Hmm.
you can install those EV chargers in the future. Let's say, whatever that might be, any type of expansion. If they'd like a hot tub, if a hot tub isn't considered a small electrical load, those can draw a
Yep.
lot of electricity, a lot of power. And so again, using that time to communicate with the engineers, with all the designers, and just
Hmm.
express everything that's wanted with the home, even if it's not wanted right now. That will allow us to prepare in our case, the electrical design to handle whatever you need to throw at it in the future if it's been coordinated with us.
Yeah. What are some items that you've seen to be, kind of future desires, but beyond, potential EVs in the garage, or hot tubs? What else?
I will say, um, going back to the EVs, I will say that's probably the most common, especially with the
Hmm.
way, EV chargers have risen in popularity. And I feel like a lot of people come back wanting to retrofit their homes to then supply those EVs. As far as additional things, um, it may be, a kitchen expansion if someone really didn't have the kitchen they wanted right now, but in the future they're planning on installing a second oven. They're planning on installing,
Hmm.
a few refrigerators and freezers out in the garage.
Yep.
These are things that you want to think about. You want to think about where you see that home being in your time living there, and make sure that you can plan for some of those future things. So again, I think the biggest one is nowadays just those EV chargers, but there are several other things that may not be installed up front that may be future items that people would want.
Yeah, I mean, the other ones that occur to me would be PV panels on the roof
Yes.
and battery backup systems.
Hmm.
So having a place identified for those and then running the wire or at least a conduit, even if you leave the conduit empty, is one of those pre-planning items that can make life in the future much, much easier.
Yeah, and to go along with that, Kory, if they feel that's something already they know they're going to want to do, then I would plan in advance to do that because they can do it, but it will
Hmm.
save a lot of time and a lot of effort by planning beforehand.
Yep, for sure. One of the things that we haven't talked about is low voltage. Do you deal a whole lot with low voltage? I mean, frequently it's like an AV person, a separate designer entirely.
It is, and we deal mostly with topical design as far as the AV system goes. So we show very locational things where we're anticipating data to run, where we're anticipating speakers to run, and we try to note that in our plans that a lot of that stuff does need to be consulted. It
Hmm.
needs to be coordinated with the low voltage designer who will actually be installing some of that stuff because they will know their manufacturer specifications, they'll know better placement and things like that. We mostly try to make sure that the equipment that they are going to install has the electrical that it needs. As you talk about AV, if you've got your power over Ethernet, if you've got your mixers, things like that, those need to plug in. You need to make sure
Yep.
that those have a space, whether that's tucked away so nobody can see them, or in an open situation. We want to know where those things are going to be so that we can plan for power. And so we plan for the backbone, we plan for topical placement and power, but a lot of the specifics to that, they are specific to whoever will be laying that out.
Okay. With smart homes and new technologies, how do you approach integrating modern technology like smart lighting and home automation into a home's actual system?
So our part in that, our approach can seem a little bit simple because
Hmm.
frankly it is. And one of the reasons it needs to be simple is, like I said, there's a lot of systems out there and
Hmm.
they differ. Not all systems are created equal, and lots have different components and different specifications. So on our end, we like to, if the owner requests it, we can specify a system. We can specify a system that they would like to use if that's what they want us to do. A lot of times, they'll have a system in mind, or the electrical contractor can spec one as well. But we like to make sure we know what they would like to have done in the
Hmm.
home. That it's when the electrical contractor is designing per our plans, it's fairly seamless for them to see this is the outcome of the smart home or the smart lighting technology that they would like to have. And we need to make sure that whatever system we specify is compatible with this. So
Yeah.
we would design again to make sure that that electrical infrastructure, that backbone for the system is there, and then the system can be specified and installed.
Okay. Are there any electrical features or systems that you'd recommend that can really add value or enhance the experience of living in a home?
Yeah, I know we've been through quite a list already,
Yeah.
even not necessarily with that intention, but we've listed so many things and some of my favorites, I guess, that I've seen is there's a lot of fun to be had with the electrical lighting design of a stairway. Whether whether,
Absolutely.
yeah, see, I mean, whether that's in the handrail, seeing lights in the handrail, or maybe a low mounted wall light that's recessed to just shine onto each of those steps, or also maybe a strip of LEDs underneath the lip of the stair. There's a lot. Again, it's a custom home. It's a time to explore what you'd like to have for your home, and there's so much fun to be had there. Again, hot tubs, ski rooms, boot dryers if you're near a ski resort, saunas.
Hmm.
Um, we just did one that they were specifying reading lights in the bunk beds for their grandchildren. So it's a small
Yeah.
button reading light in that area. There's, elevators, porch heaters. There's so much, Kory. There's just unlimited options.
There's a lot of fun to be had. Going back to your comment there on stair lighting, I actually did the stairs in my own home with some accent lighting that are motion activated. So as you walk up, the stairs turn on one by one. Um, my wife says it makes her feel like a celebrity going up the stairs every day.
So you agree with me then?
Absolutely. Those are fun little features that we love to build in. But they do have to be very carefully designed and integrated right at the beginning.
Yep, agreed. At least it's a lot easier if they will do that in the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. What is your experience with sustainable building practices and how do you incorporate that into your design?
With sustainable building practices, I'd say a lot of our work, apart from the submittals, is basically done for us. And what I mean by that is modern manufacturers, when it comes to electrical, they're
Hmm.
actually nowadays with all the pushes with the IECC codes, the International Energy Conservation Code and stuff, they're very power conscious.
Yeah.
And so nowadays you're getting a lot more manufacturers who are producing, appliances, lighting that are already power efficient. It's usually a bit of a knock against them if they're producing things that aren't. People are a little bit more aware of that.
Yeah.
And so using modern appliances is is one of the best things, getting rid of that old freezer from grandma that, it can freeze a roasted turkey in 10 seconds flat, but the power
Hmm.
used on it isn't exactly efficient.
Right.
Um, and then again, back to those submittals when we receive the equipment, making sure it's a good listed piece of equipment, making sure that it's not something that you're going to have to replace every 6 months because, even if it's energy efficient that way, it's not efficient to be, you know, buying a refrigerator every 3 years or whatever. You want something that's going to last.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think lighting is a really good example of this phenomenon just throughout the manufacturing side of things. An LED bulb uses like what, 7 watts versus an equivalent 100 watts for the same
Mhm.
amount of light, 90% more efficient, which is pretty incredible savings. And also the impact that has on the heat in a home. All those incandescent bulbs generated so much heat that we then had to counterbalance with the air conditioning systems, which resulted in even more electricity use. So it's been a very positive change. And at this point, we see virtually nothing but LEDs for interior use.
Mhm. Agreed.
Okay. What are some ways the owner can be involved in the electrical aspects of their custom home?
Well, as far as the owners being involved, I would say we've mentioned before the impact that the owner can have on just saying what they want in their home.
Hmm.
They can be involved in as much of the electrical as they would like to be, because we would appreciate that.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that again is down to what you would like in your home. Where would you like those things placed? Do you want additional, outlets beyond what the code specifies? They can be as involved with it as they want. And as you can see here today, Kory, we love to talk about electricity.
Hmm.
So if there's any questions they have, we're happy to answer them and we're happy to talk through that. So the best thing the owner can do is just not take a back seat to their custom home.
Yeah.
They need
Yeah.
to be driving that. So
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to talk about my process a little bit. So multiple times throughout the design process, we have a pause where we issue a set of drawings to the owner, and then they have a period of time, usually a week, sometimes 2 weeks, to review those drawings and provide comments. And this is exactly that time where they should be going through page by page and really taking their time to look at all of those outlet locations in detail, because it can have a really great impact on how they live in the home. So if they breeze over it because they get a little bit busy that week and they're like, oh, I'm just going to flip through electrical really quick, it's really worth spending a couple hours just with that package alone to make sure they really understand where everything goes so they can provide really robust feedback. And then again, at multiple touch points.
yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. So making sure they stay involved with the design of their home.
Okay. You've talked a little bit about how you interface with the electrical provider or the power company. Do you want to go into that in more depth?
Yeah, I can. With the power company, that can be a good or a bad experience for people. And we try to make that a good experience for them by
Hmm.
taking a lot of the heat that might otherwise go to them. And kind of going into detail there, when people want to build a home, the initial point for us is you've got to get power to that home.
Yeah.
Now, around here, we deal with Rocky Mountain Power the most. And the
Hmm.
process of that is the owner would contact Rocky Mountain Power. They would state, their intent. We're going to build a home. Great. We're going to assign you an estimator. We're going to assign you a work order number, and you need to fill out this load sheet. Well, most people look at a load sheet from Rocky Mountain Power
Hmm.
and it talks about, the horsepower of the equipment. It talks about miscellaneous loads. It talks about the different wattages for the different loads in the household. And a lot of people may look at that and feel a little bit overwhelmed. And I don't
Well,
blame.
I think we would immediately pass it off to you. You're the knowledgeable person on that front.
Well, luckily for us, the Rocky Mountain Power has been good enough that if you look on their sheet, I believe I just did
Hmm.
a residential load sheet, and I believe on that sheet they say consult an electrician or an electrical engineer. You may want to consult one of these people, and that's
Yep.
because we have to deal with that every day. And so for the owner dealing with the power company, if they can just get that ball rolling, then they can dump that over on us. Hey, here's the work order number. Here's the estimator. Will you take over this? We can fill out the load sheet. We can get in contact with the estimator because they'll have a list of things they'll want to see. They'll want to
Hmm.
see the site plan to see which transformer they want to tie in, or we'll have to figure that out from them. They want to know where the meter is going to be located, make sure it's got the specific requirements that they need. We can take care of that as long as the owner just starts the interaction. So we take a lot
Yeah.
of that strain off of the owner.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing for owners to recognize about working with the power company is they're not a member of the design team. They're a quasi-governmental organization. They are not beholden to our schedule. They're working on a lot of projects, and they may not care very much about this individual project. So it's really important to start that process early, and get that load sheet, get that order number in so that they can be working on it kind of in the background while we progress through the design process. And then hopefully, we are getting decisions and feedback from them quickly enough that it doesn't hinder the rest of the design process. But beginning early is key to that working out.
Yes, well put. Starting that early.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add about the importance of working with an electrical engineer in home design?
I think I've already said way too much, Kory, but I think
Okay.
that I think that I'll just say again that the electrical engineer can offer a lot of peace of mind.
Mhm.
Work hand in hand with those electrical contractors so that we can help each other and make sure that that home is designed right. And I would just again push for the custom home builders, or sorry, the custom home owners to
Mhm.
be involved because this is your home and we want you to have it designed how you want it. So be involved.
Okay. Fabulous. Dex, thank you for joining the conversation around the drafting table today.
Thank you, Kory. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, mine as well. Thank you for providing your thoughts on electrical engineering. And until next time, get in touch with Oxford Architects so we can dream together.